Right, are we ready? Are we excited?
Yes.
So notoriously systematic reviews are a review in it, kind of a little bit boring. So I'm going to bring the passion today because let's create some level one evidence. And you're going to get one, it's exciting and you're all going to want to do one. So firstly, what is a systematic review and why on earth would you conduct one? So the best thing I think about a systematic review is you can determine across the whole literature what is known about a certain topic. So you can be confident at that point in time that you know everything there is to know and you've read everything there is to read on a certain specific topic within the academic literature, of course. And that's just a really nice feeling. You're not missing something, which is nice. You can also appraise the quality of evidence available, and I'll talk about some other different review types and why systematic review gives that extra level of appraisal and quality of the literature as well that's out there. You can obviously do one to identify gaps in the literature, and this is really important when you're setting up a PhD, for example. You kind of do a systematic review at the start sometimes and then build your PhD base from that. You can shape and inform future research projects. So for example, if I wanted to design an intervention, I might do a systematic review of all the different components out there of interventions and why that might be important. And it avoids duplication of research. You know enough about this topic, here it is summarised beautifully for you. Maybe we don't need to look into that again. So here is a big table of the different types of reviews, and it's kind of got when you use it, why you use it sort of thing. So the narrative review is a broad descriptive kind of review. It's kind of the one that you write yourself, you get a certain topic, like an intro to your thesis or something like that is usually a narrative kind of review. Provides an overview of the literature and gaps. It has low rigour and it doesn't necessarily appraise the quality of evidence. And I'll talk about what quality of evidence means as we go into the slides. Systematic review, it is gold standard, it is focused, it is structured, it is military precision, it has got high rigour, you do have an appraisal component and a detailed evidence. So obviously the best. Scoping review, again, I won't go too much into these, but broad, exploratory, a rapid review, that's quick, hot off the press, what's happening in respiratory right now, we need to be across it, we need to get out of it. When COVID first came out, rapid reviews would be that I'm thinking of there. An umbrella review is a review of reviews. When a systematic review is not enough, you have a systematic review of systematic reviews. A meta-analysis is a quantitative study, so we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Integrative review, again, broad, mixed, kind of holistic insights, building a nice picture. And a qualitative synthesis is a qualitative study, so kind of that's the methodology sort of thing. Now, why do I care about systematic reviews? It all comes back to NHMRC's level of evidence. So systematic reviews are gold star, top tier, level one evidence. So that's the evidence that you want to use to inform policies, to inform the way you treat patients, the way anything in medical research is done. And you can see, and I won't talk about the other steps here, but these other steps kind of filter down in terms of quality of evidence. Now, quality of evidence isn't always necessarily enough, but I'll come to that. So that's why we love that. And why do we care, Vanessa? Because level of evidence are assigned to studies based on their methodological quality, their design, their validity, and how it applies to patient care. And systematic reviews are the gold star. So we love them, right? We love them. We love to do them, we love to read them, we love to cite them. And level of evidence, what that tells us is how much faith we can put into a study's conclusion. So if I write a case review on one person, that would be considered a lower level of evidence than if I did a systematic review of 30 really well conducted randomised control trials that had thousands of people in them. So you put more faith in that conclusion than the one case study. But in saying that, each type of research has its place, and it always comes back to what is your research question, what are you trying to answer and address? There you go. So I love methodology, that's what I love systematic reviews. And we use them in guidelines to justify arguments in your own papers and to make decisions about clinical practice. But sometimes systematic reviews, as amazing as they are, it can go wrong. So this is a systematic review that was released, I think, in 2019. And it was a massive paper with, I think, 20 million people in it, and basically it showed that there's a 30% increase of autism spectrum disorders and a 17% increase of ADHD in mothers who had caesarean births. And everyone was like, well, caesareans cause autism, stop it. But what that doesn't tell us is what is the causal connection. So this review, whilst it was a systematic review and they did all the right steps, it didn't have the level of data you need to determine causation. So we all know correlation doesn't equal causation in this study. We'll do that until you get the authors with it, knowledge out in the paper. But when the media grab those headlines, they're like, well, evidence says this, gets a little bit out of here. So that's probably one of the things of caution in a systematic review. So really think about limitations that you're putting on your studies. Let's go back to my So what are the key features of a systematic review? So a predefined protocol. That's really important because it allows for, and we'll talk about registering the protocol in a second, but predefined protocol is really important because that guides the whole structure of what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. And when you're doing a search later and you're like, should I include this study or exclude this study? I don't know, I've read 4,000 of them. You come back to your protocol and you're like, oh, this is what I need to include on. It involves a comprehensive search strategy. It involves a very transparent exclusion and exclusion criteria. It involves a critical appraisal, so that's that level of evidence, level of rigor within studies, and reproducibility. So I've done my amazing systematic review, you can repeat it and you will get. So the phases of a systematic review are you plan the review, you conduct the review, and you document the review. So in the planning stage, the first thing you need to do is define your research question. As I said before, with research studies, this will all come back to what type of review you want to do, is what research question you ask. So if you're doing a systematic review, it's advisable to use a PICO kind of framework, which is the population intervention comparison and outcome. Your research question should have clarity and focus, and also you should determine the need for the review. So you might come up with this beautiful research question and then you do a bit of a search and someone's already done a systematic review on it. So you're going to do an umbrella review, probably don't need to do that. So the reason it's so very important to define your research question so it has clarity and focus, firstly, it's really good science, we love that. But secondly, when you go and structure your search terms, if it hasn't got clarity and focus, you can get a really wide variety of studies and then you might get a bit confused as to whether you think they should be included, excluded, and it all comes a bit muddy. So there's a few stages in a systematic review that if you haven't got that beautiful focus, it can make your life harder. So when developing a protocol, as I said, it's wise to register it through Prospero. So that's an online database system where you upload the protocol. It's really important for transparency as well, so you let other people know what you're doing, but also holds you to what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what outcomes you set out to begin with, which map to your beautiful research question. You need to define your objectives, methods, and outcomes. And again, this comes back to having that search criteria, because when you make your search criteria, your studies and your inclusions and your exclusions, if these aren't really clear, it's really hard to muddy and just really frustrating. You need to develop your search strategies, and this thing here has a whole giant document which advises on around how you can develop a search strategy. Here at the University of Newcastle, we're really fortunate to have some really young librarians that are really, really good at this. And you can go to them and say, okay, I want to do a review on asthma and anxiety. And so they will go and we'll work out all the different variation words of asthma, and they'll do the asthma with a little asterisk, which is asthmatic. If you don't like that word, it's it'll cover up bronchial asthma, it'll cover all those sorts of things. So you structure your search of all the different words I can think of for asthma. And then I do little or statements that'll be asthma or bronchial asthma or so on and so forth. And then I'll have an and statement. And I'll have anxiety, and then all my terms for that anxiety. So I'll have anxiety or psychological stress or whatever. Now, this is where it's really important, because if you don't have a nice tight search system, you'll get thousands of 7,000 abstracts to review. 7,000 abstracts to review. And how fun is that? Yeah. So if you don't have a nice tight search strategy, you can end up with 7,000 abstracts to review. And sometimes that's okay if what you're looking for is broad and it's not like negligence of asthma and anxiety. So maybe it's, you want to be across any kind of intervention and there's a loose term for that. You might end up having to go through that many. I think the most I've ever done is 15,000, which is way too many. But anyway, nice tight search strategy, and that's a structure one, and do it with the librarian because they're great with the different ways you do that. And then you plan your data extraction and analysis. So this is all in developing your protocol, you lay it out front, get it. Conducting the review. So you'll do a literature search. So you've defined a search strategy, you're going to plug it into a literature search. For your own safety, always save that search, because by the time you finish a systematic review, a reviewer will say, or supervisors will say, we should update the search. Which just makes it easier. So if you save the search, you just rerun it, and that's better. So when you're running the search, you might want to work out what databases you want to use. So that depends on the area that you're doing a systematic review in. These are medical kind of databases, so they're the ones that we commonly use, but obviously if I was doing a systematic review for geological sciences, I'd be hitting up the geological databases. You need to work out whether you want to include grey literature sources. So some reviews do, some reviews don't. It really depends on your research question and what you're looking for. So a grey literature source is kind of something that you don't necessarily find in the academic literature. So it can be sometimes someone's blog, personal experience, those sorts of things. It could be something published on a website or a government document or something that has a thesis, yeah, had those peer review kind of things, or thesis peer review. So they're kind of things, and again, your research question may want those sources or it may not. In terms of search terms, as I said, the Boolean operator, so that's the and or statements, and go and visit the librarian, they make life so much easier and they're really fun. Also, document your search strategy, save it within the databases. So when you do have to update this review, it is really easy. You just click that button. Other things you can consider are search limitations. So I want to do a systematic review on AI. I only really care about AI since it's been in public use, which has been since 2020 or something like that. So I will limit my data search to 2020 because the development AI articles, they're not necessarily relevant to my research questions, so I'll exclude those. Or we completely changed the way we managed asthma in 1996, so I don't want any papers before that. So you need a reason just to exclude it, not just because you don't want many papers. And you can also exclude based on type of study. So I only want to look at humans, I don't want to look at rats, I only want to look at within subjects design, not between subjects design. I only want to look at interventions and those sorts of things. You can. I don't know if the limitations are that bang on when it comes to these searches, but you lose a little bit. Instead of 7,000, you might have 6,900. Okay, selection and screening. So this is where your protocol and your predefined question is key. So you apply your inclusion and exclusion criteria. And the way you do it is usually you do a title screen and then an abstract screen. Sometimes those steps are combined. And then you move on to full text screen. So back in the day, we used to input it into EndNote and log this in an Excel spreadsheet. But now we have Confidence and we love Confidence. It's much nicer. You can use it on your phone. You can be sitting in a car at soccer and going, except it works. Definitely haven't. So what you do is you'll put your searches in your databases across the 3 databases or 4, whatever you're using. Usually standard is 3. People like to show off useful words, okay, we'll let them do that. We'll combine them all and then we import it into Confidence or EndNote. We screen for duplicates because obviously across the different databases you're going to get duplicates. Again, the process for doing that is not really perfect. And it's hard because you might see something at reference 1 and then something at reference 6,000 and you don't know whether you've seen that. But anyway, the duplicates still do exist, so it is a problem, but you do eventually end up screening them out and you full text screen. So you do a title screen first. There's a little search function in Confidence, so you can, put in mouse model and it'll bring up all the mouse model studies. You quickly look at the titles, exclude. I don't care about children, I'll put in pediatrics, exclude. You got to obviously pay attention to the titles and skim the titles so that you know that you're not excluding anxiety and depression in kids and adults with asthma, because I care about the adult elements. That's what I want to look at in my research question. But that's everything. So as I said, confidence is amazing. It all comes in there. So the way it works is that you do that, and then it goes through to the full text review. The full texts get uploaded. And then at that point, you go and you read the full text. Basically, you read the methods and you say, okay, it has the outcome that I'm looking at, it has the design I'm looking at, it's the population I'm looking at, and it's the type of article I'm looking at. You get to go on to data extraction, so you click include, or it hasn't got an Australian population and I only care about this in Australian population, so exclude, and then it'll give me a drop-down list of reasons, all log and report at the end. I'm going to say it's the wrong population type or wrong study design or whatever that is. So that's when you exclude that, and then what I end up with is a beautiful list of full text articles that I'm going to go through and extract. Now, one of the key parts of a systematic review is having a Prisma flow diagram, and I'll show you what that is later, but that's why we need to keep a log of at every step what we did and why we did that. And data extraction. So the best thing to do, and again, we used to do this in Excel, but things are clever now, is develop a standardized form. So that again is based on your protocol and what you wanted to look at. You'll extract the key variables. So these are things like study designs, number of participants, interventions, outcomes, results. And you might care about a few things. So in my review, I'm going to care about anxiety score, but I'm also going to care about asthma control, and I'm going to care about asthma quality of life and other things. Now, not all of the studies will have every single one of the outcomes I'm interested in, but in my protocol, I've defined my primary outcome, which this one was asthma control. So if it has asthma control, it's in. And so I pull that out into a beautiful table and I double check accuracy. Now, guys, something I learned this morning when I was drumming up business to get everyone excited for systematic reviews, I was talking to a friend going, how exciting is systematic reviews? And she said, oh my God, have you heard of this work from the Matilda Centre where a group of PhD students clearly didn't want to extract the data, so they made an AI chatbot to extract the data for them, and then they've published on the feasibility or validity of this AI chatbot, so you can cite it in your methods, and they've also provided it free of charge there for people as well, so it's open access to now. And the way they suggest to use it, and again, we just learned about this morning, so I will give you some caveats, is that they use it as a second reviewer or the first reviewer, so they might get it all to extract it, and then the second reviewer goes in and checks the quality and consistency and whether it's doing things. I think it actually ended up being a bit more accurate than the people. Oh my God. Not surprising. So that's really cool and something I learned about this morning. And then I sent this to a friend and said, thought you'd like to know about this, and that friend said to me, I'm already actually across this. Another friend did. And they also said that there's actually AI tools that can do every single stage of the systematic review that can probably function as the second reviewer.
Niva is using Copilot.
Is he? Yeah. So I think it's really come along from your Excel spreadsheet.
I know that was wrong.
Yeah, so this is my caveat to it. What you want to do though, if you are going to use this type of technique, is check where you're sending it to and do the journal harvest statement on the use of AI. And if they're cool with it, that's okay. And also really check with your investigator team that this is what you're doing, this is how you're doing it. And then the AI essentially becomes part of the writing team, right? Yeah, so that's just a flag there. But I think going forward, these kinds of tools are really, really useful. And you'll probably be able to just write in ChatGPT soon enough. Give me a systematic review on this and just do one for you. But anyway, as you all know, if you've ever used AI, you've got to double check that. Makes sense. Anyway, so this is something I learned about this morning that I thought was really cool. And what did they say? You saved 36 minutes per study in data extraction. So that's a whole lot of time. And if you're writing a review by yourself, then this can save a lot of time. So, you know, yeah, analysis is my favourite part. So, you guys are excited, what's going on? So there are different types of data synthesis that can occur, and this one, Elle, is a shout out to you. So there's different types of ways in which you can merge all the data together, and this is qualitative data. Now, if you don't know what qualitative means, basically that's the talking kind of research. So I conduct qualitative review of you, I want to understand your experience of organising a learn at lunch. And I can't really do that by a survey and get that deep level of information. You might say, Vanessa, it's been the best experience of my life. Top 10 buckets. So that's what a qualitative interview is. Then we get the transcript of that interview and we code it and we merge it with other people's experience and we get meaning like that. So that's a qualitative study. How'd it go, Bill? Yeah, good. So this is kind of a different sort of way in which you merge that data here. And as I said, with the other one I showed you like this, there's different reasons in which you do different ones. The ones we most commonly use here and we will use for a data synthesis of a qualitative systematic review would be thematic synthesis. That's one we're most experienced in, and also the one that the readers of the respiratory audience probably feel most comfortable reading, like the interviews and journals around here. But there are other ones, and I just wanted to let you know that they do exist, and just a little bit of a snapshot of their strengths and weaknesses. But again, it always will come back to what kind of research question you answer and how much detail you want to give. So I won't necessarily go into all of that stuff there, but since the thematic synthesis is probably what we most likely use in putting that kind of information together. Meta-analysis, guys, get excited. When you have numbers, so we will go through our study and we'll get out all the ACQs and we will put it all together and we'll get like an effect size or D or something like that, and some confidence intervals. So effect size is like the true effect lies around here with a confidence interval of around here, and then we compare that across studies, and it's just like the bonus charts here. We give you these charts, my favourite charts, there's so much information. This is the forest plot of effect sizes, so as you can see the studies are listed along there, and you can see that there's favouring treatment and favouring placebo. So if it's on this side of the line, which you can actually have a line here, if on this side of the line, dodgy stand, then it's favouring treatment. And then at the bottom there, you can see that little green triangle. That's merging all of it. No, it's good. That's merging all of it together, and you kind of go, based on all of these studies, the intervention is working and favouring the treatment intervention. So that is a meta-analysis. And again, back in the day, they were really hard to do. You'd have to buy specialist software, but guys, now Stata can do it. And SPSS. You can also get specific programs, so Roadman and comprehensive meta-analysis as well. But I was super excited about that development, and I don't think you guys are excited enough. So things you need to look out for meta-analysis is, and what it will give you is a heterogeneity assessment. And you might have heard this term if you've ever done a meta-analysis. People talk about heterogeneity assessments. So what that means in really basic terms is the groups aren't similar enough to compare. Comparing apples and oranges. And sometimes we can compare apples and oranges, they're both fruit, but sometimes you can't compare apples and oranges, and you can't go, well, it's a banana. It's not. So that's, thank you. So that's what the heterogeneity assessment is, which is this little fun little I squared. And I don't know what that symbol's called. It's green. Anyway, I squared. High I squared, bad. Low I squared, good. So you kind of want it under 25-ish. But what high I squared means is that you have higher heterogeneity, you can't compare them. So you want to split them out. So Kirsty was talking about a systematic review this morning. Again, we were super excited about this topic. And she had a design where she was comparing animal studies and people studies. Now, putting them together, because there's different underlying mechanisms from rats to people usually, you can't really do that. It's a bit of apples and oranges. So if you could subgroup it out, so you might do a meta-analysis on animals and a meta-analysis on people, and you might be able to then see clear trends. And another way is kind of study design. I did this within subjects design thing, and it showed this great effect, and then I did between subjects and it didn't. And then you can kind of get an indication of what might be driving that heterogeneity. Actually, it's study design. It's not that these groups are different at all or whatever. So that's one tip there. And undertaking you can only undertake a meta-analysis essentially if you have low heterogeneity. So if they're too different from each other, then your interpretation is just not meaningful. So as I said, the solution to that is the subgroup analysis, and then another solution to that is a meta-regression, which we'll talk about in a minute. So that's really, really, really important. If you have high heterogeneity, then essentially interpreting the findings is really flawed, and you probably shouldn't, at least with much caution. Meta-regression. Who's heard of meta-regression? Yes. And who's excited about it? Thank you. Meta-analysis. So again, that combines the effect sizes, Macmillan's D across studies, and we look at them visually and we can look at them intelligently. Meta-regression explains why there's variation. So hang on, yes, I have really high heterogeneity. I need to just throw out this review I've been working on for the last 9 months. Absolutely not. I got you. We're going to do meta-regression. Now, meta-regression is something that accounts for study level variables. So essentially, like a regression, we want to see what other things might be influencing this heterogeneity. So they could be things like, and we can't subgroup. So they could be things like sample size. Oh, that study had 4,000 people and the other studies had 20, right? That's probably the driver. Age of participants. These were all really young people, and that's skewing my results and causing high heterogeneity. Dose. These people got 1 kilograms worth of something, and these people got 10 mils of something. It's gonna skew your results. And year of publication. So things change, technology changes, especially in like an IT kind of digital world. Other worlds doesn't really matter as much. So what a meta-regression does is how these things influence the effect size. So essentially looking at the relationship of these things to that Cohen's D effect size I was talking about. Meta-regression, who's excited now? Thank you. All right, when should you do a meta-regression? When you have high heterogeneity, I've covered that. When there are potential moderators and when there are things that are very obviously going to influence your outcome and you know about. So as with any kind of statistic, when you have sufficient number of studies, so you need, if you're looking at one covariate, you need at least 10 studies. So if you've only got 3 studies in your meta-analysis, you can't do meta-regression. And when you want to explore sources of heterogeneity, like, I don't know, maybe it's this, who knows? When it's not appropriate, you haven't got enough studies. If you haven't got enough heterogeneity, then there's not really a whole lot of point of doing meta-regression. And when there's no real clear point to doing it, so any kind of statistics, they really do avoid against fishing expeditions. You need to have a clear purpose. Linking back to your beautiful research question. And other types of meta-analysis. Look at this. Did you know that there were other types? So there is the traditional meta-analysis and that I've covered. This slide is for you, Pete. There is the individual patient meta-analysis. So the individual patient meta-analysis is I get a group of data from our friends in Denmark, and I get some data from our friends in Spain, and I get some data from our friends in Portugal, and I add it to our data here, and I'll run an analysis looking at effect sizes on the patients, not the studies. So whereas with the meta-analysis, I'm looking at studies, whereas this is basically like a big patient thing. Now, I've put at the end here why you want to do that, and you want to do that when you want to get really precise estimates. You want to have nice control of confounders because you've got more data to work with than what is just reported at a study level. And you can do subgroup analysis and time to event analysis. So there's also network meta-analysis. I won't go through all of these because there's so many there, but you can come and talk to me later and give you the slides where it's like. Cumulative meta-analysis, so you're adding studies over time. So that might be something that's really important, that's evolving really rapidly, like AI might be something that you add studies over time. Cochrane reviews kind of work this way. Oh, actually, they're probably more living meta-analysis. Anyway, meta-regression we've talked about. Bayesian meta-analysis, look guys, way too much, just chill out. Diagnostic meta-analysis, so we're looking at the diagnostic performance of tools, very specifically that element instead of kind of that favours placebo, favours intervention kind of design. Prognostic meta-analysis, so you're looking at the value of predicting future outcomes in something, of a disease. Multivariate meta-analysis, so you're correlating multiple outcomes at the end. And a living meta-analysis, where you're just continually adding studies all the time. That's a lot of work, so you really want to have to do that. And guys, evidence quality. Probably the biggest point, Kelly Steele, I saw that you left. Probably the biggest point with meta-analyses is rubbish in, rubbish out. If all the papers you've included in your meta-analysis with your beautiful research question and your design protocol and you conducted all the steps amazingly, if they're not high quality papers, then you really are limited in the conclusions you can make from that analysis. So how do I know if my evidence is quality? Vanessa? Level alone is not enough. I told you level 1 is amazing, but it's not a full picture. NHMRC loves grade, and they use grade to assess evidence quality in putting into guidelines and things that are used in clinical practice. Grade provides an overall assessment structure and key factors to consider to increase or decrease our confidence in terms of what we found in our study and our conclusions. So factors that are used in deciding on quality of evidence, that one wants to go. The consistency of the individual study results may vary. So you have really wide different estimates, you have really wide confidence intervals. So if you have really wide confidence intervals, that means that the data within it is really, really different to each other. It's really varied. And the true difference is somewhere in there, but the range is so big, of course, it's somewhere in there. So a drug may perform, and then we talk about flaws and ceiling effects, the differences in populations. If I only looked at really sick people, well, the drug is going to make them better because it's got more room to make them better. Whereas how is that going to work in people with mild asthma or people with mild anxiety? And also other factors is how directly the evidence answers the research question of interest. So how well did they set up their research question, their intervention, their design as well. So that's all goes into understanding this. The risk of publication and reporting bias, and we all know about the file draw problem. You know the file draw problem, we've heard this before? I love that, okay. So negative trials, so studies that don't show a difference between an intervention and the control, sometimes are seen as less sexy. Now that's changing a lot, but what happens is that they generally don't get published as frequently in the journals as studies that show huge differences. So that means that there's a whole bunch of papers sitting in people's file drawers, this was from the 70s, anymore, that don't necessarily make it out there to publication. So when we're looking at the evidence, it's probably not telling us the full picture. Now, I think that this is far less a problem now than it was for me when I started 15 years ago. Do you agree? So factors on deciding evidence quality, there's some quality cost for you. Risk of bias. Guys, there's an assessment tool for that, don't worry. So a risk of bias form or systematic error form that can affect scientific quality, distort the measurement process. And there's checklists and tools that you can use to actually work out the bias in these studies. And you go through, so you've got 20 studies in your systematic review, you actually go through each study and you assign them a like kind of a plus minus score. I'll show you what one looks like in a minute. And the other thing that can influence quality is study limitations. So lack of allocation, so if you're planning your randomised control trial, lack of allocation, concealment, lack of blinding, if particular outcomes are subjective, although that's tricky with behavioural interventions. Large losses to follow-up, failure to adhere to an intervention, or failure to do an intention to treat analysis, because the people that showed up and engaged in the intervention could be a biased sample, that people that are engaged and want to do well, or people that were doing well, so they kept engaged in the program, or something like that. And then the precision estimates, again, wide confidence intervals, or just not enough events. So, you survey me and Vanessa and Eleanor on a particular topic, and it's vastly different, or really the same, and that doesn't really tell us anything. We need to sample everyone in the room to get a better understanding of what. And what grade gives you is basically, when you use their framework, high, yes, the confidence interval, the precise measure, yes, it's here within this, it's quite small and we love it. Moderate, we kind of think it's pretty good. Low, we're not sure. And very low, we have very little confidence in this space out. Now, in terms of grade, there is a grade for everything. So there's a grade for interventions, there's a grade for network meta-analysis, there's a grade for patient preferences and values. So go and check it out, Google NHMRC grade, and you can come across all these tools that can help you guide to assess your own research quality, but also the research qualities of these papers. And risk of bias assessment, as I said, there's the different tools for that. And this is essentially what it gives you here. So it's kind of a little bit hard to see, but down in this little box thing, there's bias arising due to the randomisation process. So was this study randomised? So yes or no, you get a nice tick. Bias due to deviations of the intended interventions, or hang on, they didn't deliver the intervention as they outlined in the protocol. Why did they do that? Did they get halfway through and change it? That's what's going on. Bias due to missing outcome data. So again, the loss to follow-up people, why didn't they come back? Is there a reason for that? Was the study, too much for them? Was it making them sick? Who knows? Bias in the measurement of the outcome, so you measured the wrong outcome, that can happen. Bias in selection of reported results, again, when you're looking back to what their original protocol was, did they report something else? Why did they report something else? Are they trying to obscure something? Are they trying to, whatever? And overall risk of bias, then you get a little score of all of these. So green is low risk of bias, yellow is some bias, and red is high risk of bias. Usually people are yellow, I think, because there's always something. Reporting. Okay, so nearly there, guys. In terms of reporting the main study results, there are reporting guidelines again for every kind of study. Go and check them out. They're awesome, but the ones we're going to look at today is the PRISMA reporting guideline. So this is what it looks like. And this picture up here is the consort diagram that I was talking about. So that's how many abstracts you started with, where they went, how I culled them, what reason I gave to cull them, and then it goes right down to the studies that were included. And sometimes the studies that were included might end up with something culled when you start a data extraction point, and that can happen as well because you think that they met the criteria and then you're like, oh, actually, they didn't follow this out. And then there's PRISMA steps here, and you can go and look at this in your own time. It's beautiful because often when you submit a systematic review, you have to submit this along with it. You have to mark out which pages these things happened on. So when you're writing it, just make sure you do those first. It saves you having to add them in later. And common pitfalls, again, vague research question, makes your search hard, makes your life hard. Incomplete search, so you didn't map out those search terms, so you haven't got a nice comprehensive base, you're actually getting what you want. Bias in selection or extraction, so I really just want to know about this particular thing, and I'm only going to include studies that I think are related to that particular thing. Don't do that, that's not for you. That's why we have two reviews. Not registering a protocol, again, that leads to the keeping it all above board, and selectively outcome reporting. Again, I only care about this because this is good for my research, so I'm not going to talk about that. Okay. Conclusion, systematic reviews are great. Who wants to do one? Everyone. They're the gold standard for evidence. They get cited a lot. They're a lot of work, but they do get cited a lot. And I think when you've done one, you're like, this is so good. They require rigor, transparency, and reproducibility. They're the foundation for evidence-based decision making. So people definitely use them. Government policies use them. People everywhere love them. And you get the satisfaction of knowing there is absolutely everything to know about people. Like I am. So go forth and review with confidence. Thank you. So I have your yeah, were you excited? And thanks for laughing at my joke. Any questions? Hi, tell me.
Can you slide up, Vanessa, on the definitions on the levels of evidence?
Mm-hmm.
Hello. I'm interested in your thoughts. So what's it say, the top one?
Systematic reviews.
Of relevant well-designed ICTs. So where would you fit a systematic review of observational studies, cohort studies?
So I didn't actually look into where that fits, and I'm sure that people have definitely had thoughts on where it fits. Again, I guess it depends on the research question.
I don't think it fits.
Yeah, if your research question can only be answered by observational data, and you've parachute failures in aeroplanes, we're not going to randomise that. I've heard some of them before. Then I would think that it would be equivalent level 1, because it is the best that you can do of that type of data for that research question.
Then you have all those biases and that's informing practice based on level one evidence where we know that
It's not.
it's not level one.
Yeah.
So this concerns me.
Yeah.
And it's a discussion we frequently had on the CFEDX guidelines.
Yeah. So
Because
there's
we
a lot
wanted
of things that would-
attributing levels to systematic reviews and we all felt uncomfortable doing that.
Yeah.
So I was interested in your thoughts on that.
I think it has to have some kind of caveat explainer. Because again, there are just some things that can't be RCT. And so should we just not accumulate evidence for
But
those?
there's also things that can be but haven't been.
No,
And
they don't
therefore,
count.
people are assigning level one evidence to cohort studies
No.
based on that.
No, I would disagree with that. What's something that I could think of, like something that's really well known and you probably didn't need to do a systematic review. I could allow that, but in terms of if it can be answered by RCT data, then I think it should be. What the other you this harsh, you need to be, mate.
Yeah, I think if RCT evidences are available,
Yeah,
then that will overcome the cohort studies.
yeah, and not available, not because someone hasn't done it, not available because you can't do it, because ethically you can't do it. Like I can't randomize to bad parachute, good parachute, that's fine.
For example, like our MAP studies, like monoclonal antibody studies, they
Yeah.
have phase 3, phase 4 RCTs.
Yeah,
So that RCT evidence is better than what we are doing, like the real world studies.
yeah,
That RCT will be published in New England Journal of Medicine.
yes.
However, this one will be published in.
I just think if it's in New England Journal of Medicine, we're done. But yeah, I think it's really complicated and I don't have a definitive answer. I think it'd have to be even just maybe another hierarchy or another something. I don't know. Yeah, any other thoughts?
You mentioned grey literature in types of
Yes.
evidence, including websites, but also blogs. How often and in what context would you want to actually include something like a blog in a systematic review?
So if I was doing a systematic review on someone's experience of, having anxiety and asthma, and these people were putting that kind of stuff. Again, this is not the kind of research that I personally do, but I think people do. Or if I was doing a systematic review on complementary medicine and people's interaction with complementary medicine, in that element, I might think to look in the grey literature. Again, it's not something I've necessarily ever done, or probably would answer the research questions that would enable that, but yeah.
So you wouldn't look at it necessarily if you're looking at the evidence to support the benefit of childhood vaccinations or something like that. You wouldn't go to all the
No.
blogs out there.
No, we'll come back to my research questions. If I was doing a systematic review of people's opinions on that, then I might do that.
Yeah.
And go, okay, and that might give me an understanding of the barriers. And the reason I will do that, I justify it to my research question by saying, if I do a survey because of that lovely bias and people want to, give you what they think you want, then people who are necessarily not into that will not really answer my survey. So they're not going to opt in to do it. Whereas they might be very, very vocal out in this community and I want to know what they're vocal about because I want to understand their problems and that kind of stuff. So that sort of research question I would consider including that. Again, it's way out of my research.
Yeah.
Always comes back to your research.
I have a question about heterogeneity.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that if the data is too heterogeneous, it may not be worthwhile to do the systematic review. But is there a way to check that before?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
meta-analysis, sorry.
So you definitely would still do the systematic review and you would report it as this data has high heterogeneity. We didn't do systematic review for this reason. However, Should this. Yes, so when you do an actual meta-analysis using Stato, RevMan, SPSS or comprehensive meta-analysis, there, depending on the program, there'll be a little box that you can tick for it to do a heterogeneity assessment, and it gives you this little I-squared number. And the I-squared number is a ratio essentially between 0 and 1. So if it's high, negative.
But you have to do the analysis anyway to check. if
You
there-
do have to do the analysis. So essentially, the other thing you could do, and it would depend on the reviewer's reviewing it, is report it. But what I personally would do is say I did this meta-analysis here and I got really high heterogeneity. I'd be like, okay, let's look at subgrouping it. If there's obvious subgrouping, like with Kirsty's example of people and animals, that's a very obvious subgroup. I would expect high heterogeneity there. Or I would look at meta-regression and go, okay, what's driving this high heterogeneity? And depending on what research question you're asking, might drive which one you go down there. Or you could do all of them.
Josie, there are now swim guidelines as
There you
well.
go.
So swim guidelines are doing synthesis without meta-analysis. And you would use those in the case of high heterogeneity. So it then gives you this framework for that synthesis without meta-analysis.
It's a framework for review.
And
Any other
some
questions?
heterogeneity, I think we can address via random effect model.
Yes, so a random effect model, which is the one that this screen grab from Google did, does address some heterogeneity.
Yeah,
But you know, we don't want to
we
push
don't
it
know what
too
is
far.
come.
Yeah, oh, no, there are cut-offs that people bang on about, so
Yeah.
kind of below 30%, people are like, yeah, you're fine, anything, and then above, like, it's 50 or 60 people.
And again,
I'm
there's
gonna go.
Sorry, any other questions? Well then, I hope everyone is super keen to do a meta-analysis, systematic review or meta-regression now. Thanks, guys. Hope you all learned. Yes, we did. Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone. Nice meeting. Meeting's online.